top athletes better equipped to deal with stress than normal people like us? And what happens in the body of a circus artist when he's thrown into the air? And what can we, normal people, learn from these circus artists? The day before we start with Circusstad Festival, here in the center of Rotterdam, we are going to talk about this, and we are going to do research on it live with Diana van Winden and Mesut Savas. I'm saying that we are going to do live research. We're going to talk about it here at the table, but we will be doing some analysis. You guys will be doing some analysis on acrobats Scott and Sanne, who are preparing over there. So at the end of the interview, or halfway the interview, I will ask you guys to join me to take a look at the act that Scott and Sanne have prepared under the name of No Nonsense, professional circus artists. But first, you guys are both professionally dealing with stress and with pressure. In your case, you are bewegingswetenschapper in English?
Human movement scientist.
Human movement scientist and a sports psychologist affiliated with Codarts. You're doing your PhD on ballet dancers, right?
Contemporary dancers.
Contemporary dancers, excuse me. Mesut, you are working for the Erasmus Medical Center and researching the relation between stress hormones like cortisol and obesity.
Yeah, and obesity-related diseases.
Obesity-related diseases, okay. Like, for example?
Well, we can think about the high blood pressure, also called hypertension, diabetes mellitus, or the thing we call the metabolic syndrome is actually a constellation of different risk factors for developing heart diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You are doing research to the unhealthy effects of stress.
Yeah.
Stress is a sort of negative approach recently, right? So when we talk about stress, it's basically something you get unhappy from or you get sick from.
Yeah, actually when stress is mentioned, most of all are automatically thinking about the mental pressure which leads to emotional and physical complaints. But in biological sense, we actually can't live without stress. We need stress to survive, to adapt to changing circumstances. Mm-hmm. And behind this whole...
Can you give an example?
Well, to give us an example, the whole thing about the stress, we have our own stress system, which is actually a hormonal symphony between the brain, the nervous system, but also the adrenal glands.
Hormonal symphony, you were calling it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what happens actually is that the interaction between all different parts of the body actually is responsible for secreting several hormones, including the stress hormone cortisol, mm-hmm. which is actually needed to adapt to changing situation, like in case of physical or mental stressors.
For example, when you have to sit at the talk show table and talk about your research.
For example, or lying away, running away from a lion, or running for the bus.
When have you done that lately? Yeah.
Happily never, but you never know.
Diana, in your research, how are you dealing with stress professionally?
Well, we research the health of our dance students, mm-hmm. and we do that in the physical part, but also the mental part. For instance, stress. Mm-hmm. And
is this a big issue for students at Codarts?
Yeah, the students at our school are dealing with a lot of pressure to be there all the time, to perform at their best, to have high grades, but also develop themselves into a professional. Mm-hmm. And it's a profession that doesn't have a lot of options. You know, it's like there are 20 dancers and one spot.
Mm-hmm. So either you make it or you don't.
Yeah.
And most of them finally don't, or they end up doing something different than they wished to be doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot of hard work.
And this leads to a big amount of stress for students at Codarts.
Could be. Yeah.
And resulting in worst case scenario.
For instance, injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the relationship between stress and injuries on a later scale, and we know already that higher stress levels.
And injuries meaning blessures, or okay,
yeah. So it could be anything. A lot of ankle problems, knee problems, stuff like that.
Okay, so we have somebody specialized in injuries, physical injuries and mental problems with top athletes. You are doing research to obesity-related problems. We are going to do something differently. For you, this is something you do regularly. You don't, right?
No.
Researching circus artists.
No.
No.
The thing is, we actually. I'm also consulting patients at our own obesity expertise center in Erasmus. And in our case, we actually deal with the long term, so the chronically elevated cortisol levels. And in your case, it's more the acute stress.
Okay, so because you mentioned this, because the chronic stress levels, those are the guys who make you sick, right?
Yeah.
So the chronic cortisol level, which is high, is something that's no good news.
Yeah.
But the acute stress is something functional and healthy.
Well, that's actually beneficial. I mean, you can imagine if you're now standing, I'm gonna use the same example as if you're now standing eye in eye with a lion, you actually need to quickly adapt physical and also mental to fight or flight the situation. So what happens is that if the acute stress system kicks in, then your muscles actually tense up, you feel your heart rate going up, your blood pressure rises, you become more alert, and all the things in body actually change for a short period of time just to fight or flight the situation. So it's actually beneficial.
Yeah. Would you say that people with high stress levels automatically make good top athletes or circus artists, for example? Is it something you need a lot?
Well, not necessarily.
Or might it be the other way around, that when you are a circus artist, you learn how to...
I don't know any research which has been done in circus artists, but I know that, in case of high physical demand, like in athletes, especially endurance athletes, like the marathon runners, what we see is that they actually also have a high cortisol level. But in this case, it is because the body is constantly needing cortisol because of the high physical demands. So they have to perform all the time. So in this case, you will
They're always on.
They was always on, and in this case, it will not actually always lead to negative symptoms like obesity or high blood pressure, because the body actually needs it.
Okay.
But in case of other stressors, especially like the mental stressors, like in case of unemployment, of depression, which was called before, then you can actually develop all the negative symptoms.
Yeah.
Now,
you looked at the long-term stress levels in one of the athletes we are going to watch, Scott Mikowski. What did you find, and how did you do this? Because there is a very specific method to it, right?
Yeah, that's true. Well, I think for most of the person in the audience, it's known that we can measure hormone levels in body fluids like saliva, urine, or blood. But the thing with cortisol is that this only gives a snapshot of a relatively small window of hours to even days. So if you want to know what the cortisol levels are for a longer period of time, we are actually using a new matrix. What we do in Erasmus is we measure cortisol, not in the body fluids, but in scalp hair. So what we do, we take a small sample from the back of the head. It's showed here. So what we did, we took a small sample of the back of the head of Scott, and we processed it in the lab. And what we did, we actually make a small segment. So in the most recent period, because hair grows with 1 centimeter per month. So if depending on the length you have, you can actually look back into time in months or even years. So in this case, with Scott, we actually measured the average in the past 3 months.
Okay. Yeah. And how was he doing?
Well, I actually have made a picture of it. What we have is that we previously measured the cortisol levels in a lot of the normal persons, and what we found, you can see the reference age in green. And Scott is actually pretty normal, so I'm glad to share this with Scott that he's not chronically stressed.
Okay, yeah. That's the good news. We are going to see whether he is acutely stressed. But this is even harder, right? So can you explain what we will be doing in a minute?
Well, with the acute stress is you can also see the acute effects. And one of the effects, what I said before, is that you will see an increase in the heart rate. And one of the methods to measure this is actually a method from you and from Codarts, which they actually use a mobile sensor which is strapped on the chest, and which can actually measure the heart rate. So I think in a minute or something we will see whether it's we can see the acute stress response in the performers.
Okay. What we are going to do right here, we will be watching you guys. I will introduce you properly in a couple of minutes. First, we had our two volunteers on the first row. And I think, Mesut, you are able to say something about their stress levels already, right? Go ahead.
Well, what we see is actually you have 4 different colors. So the green and the red one are the 2 performers. And the yellow and the blue one are actually our controls. And what you actually see is that this was the moment before Geert asked them the question. You see that they were actually quite stable. But at the moment they start talking, you see a stable increase in both of them.
And who is the purple?
The purple is you. So you have you reach maybe your mask, you're around 140 beats per minute.
Okay.
But you still see a really good increase in both of them. And while you're now sitting, you actually see that they're decreasing again. So. And at the moment you are laughing about it increase again. So I think you're still a little bit stressed. But I think we will also hope to see similar changes in our performance.
Yeah, right now we see some slight differences between the 4, right? Diana, maybe you can answer who is who and what is happening, and if this says something already about them being non-professionals and them being professional athletes. Does this say something about the heart rate already?
Well, first, Sun is the green one.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can remember that. And Scott is the red one.
Okay. So the 2 females are having a lower heart rate. Is that something?
Yeah, heart rate is like different between genders, but also ages and trainability. How do you say that? The person who's better trained has most of the times a lower heart rate.
Okay, okay.
But it's also very personal. So you can have a very high rest heart rate. So when you're not doing anything, your heart rate is already higher than that one of another person.
Yeah.
And that's just genetically determined. So it doesn't really mean always that you have a bad condition.
Okay. We are going to watch No Nonsense. Scott and Sanne, what are you guys are performing on Circusstad Festival. Right now you are going to give us a preview of about 5 minutes, I think, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What are you going to do for us?
We're gonna bring an acrobatic act where we will be in a little... you will see. Do I have to explain?
Yeah, we can discuss afterwards a little bit. Are you of the two of you who's the most stressed type?
Her.
You say, yeah. her, she's the most stressed one. Okay. Is Scott right? Are you the stressed one of the 2?
For sure.
Okay. You will be thrown into the air and stuff like that. Is this stressful for you as a professional artist, or?
I don't think so, but we will see.
We will find out. Science never lies. Take your places, guys, and can I have a big warm applause for No Nonsense?
So what you actually see is that the upper two are the performers, and you can see that at the moment they're performing, they're starting the act. You see the really fast increase in the heart rate, which is also due to not only the mental before, but also the physical stressor. And besides that, you see that they are now in rest. The one that has stopped, but you see that they are now it's now declining because I think that was Scott. No, Sanne. So she is taking a rest. So you see that's declining. And the funny thing is that you also see some peaks in the controls. So we see it actually at this moment. And I actually noticed this, and this was exactly the moment when they start with the handstand. So it's
Danielle thought this was really exciting, right?
Yeah, especially the blue one. Yeah. So it's good to see that you guys love the show actually. So.
Yeah, well, Danielle did, but you were really steady, apathically. Okay, one thing I noticed was that when Sanne was upside down, her heart rate declined a little bit. How do you explain that?
Well, handstands are not what we normally do. That's for sure. But for Sanne, it's something she does way more often than the average person. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure, but I also think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wait, I will move it for. So what you can see is when she does a handstand, you get a peak. So her heart rate has to be it goes up a bit, but then it goes down because we have more gravity. So it helps your blood flow all the way from your toes to your heart.
It's easier to pump the blood into the legs than pump the blood.
Well, your head needs the most.
Okay, okay.
And your toes, not that important.
Sanne, can you keep doing this for how long?
I don't know. I don't know for how long.
Did you? What's the longest you did it? Once?
At least a minute.
We can do that. We can beat that, right, guys? Okay, can I give one more big applause for Sanne? And Diana, Mesut, anything else we need to mention about the science that was delivered to us?
Well, maybe good to see that science is not always easy.
Because
if you're
Scott,
thinking what was happening with Scott, his monitor probably went off somewhere during the performance. Unfortunately, that happens when you do real-life research. But luckily, you can see from like here on, Scott is still working normally.
Okay.
So for him as well, nice to see.
Thanks, guys, for you doing this experiment with us, talking about your work and doing a crossover with No Nonsense tonight. A big hand for No Nonsense, Diana van Winden en Mesut Savas. En mag ik natuurlijk een groot applaus voor onze vrijwilligers, Mark en Danielle.